Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today's story follows Jake Morrison, a cargo pilot who crash lands on a dazzling alien world, and with one careless greeting, accidentally triggers an ancient bonding ritual with Princess Lyra, throwing them both into deadly court politics, assassination plots, and a looming interstellar war. But as they uncover how peace has been maintained through invisible control and manipulation, they're forced to make the hardest decision of all: accept a comfortable cage or choose messy, frightening freedom, and fight to protect that freedom without becoming tyrants themselves. The emergency alarm was screaming bloody murder as Jake Morrison fought the controls. His little freighter, the Vagrant Star, was bucking like a wild animal through a field of cosmic junk, its hull groaning loud enough to hear over the siren. "Come on, girl, just hold together," Jake begged, his fingers flying across the holographic dash. The 28-year-old pilot was no stranger to close calls, but this was on another level. The hyperspace lane had just collapsed, spitting him out in a corner of the galaxy that wasn't on any chart, and filling his cockpit view was an alien world, a marble of shimmering blue oceans and continents that glowed with a soft, living light. Jake was out of options. The Vagrant Star's engines were dying, and that planet was his only prayer. The landing was anything but smooth. Hitting the atmosphere turned the cockpit into an oven, and Jake clenched his jaw as the G-force tried to shove him through his own seat. The ship's computer was squawking warnings he'd never heard before. Through the fire of re-entry, he saw impossible cities, buildings that floated in the air like giant jellyfish, all connected by bridges made of pure light. The Vagrant Star slammed onto a landing pad, skidding across what looked like polished black glass before screeching to a stop. Jake's head swam as he fumbled with his harness, doing a quick mental check for broken bones. He seemed to be in one piece, which was more than he could say for his ship. "Oh, that's just perfect," he muttered, popping the canopy. The air that flooded in was shockingly sweet, with a scent like cinnamon and a thunderstorm, and it made him a little dizzy. As Jake swung himself out onto the pad, he froze solid. He had a welcoming party. A squad of guards had him surrounded, their armor shining like liquid mercury under the planet's 3 suns. They were definitely not human. Each one was at least 7 feet tall, with long, thin limbs. Their faces were sharp and graceful, with skin that shimmered from pale silver to a soft gold as they moved. But it was their eyes that really got him. They were huge and cut like diamonds, and right now, they were all pointed directly at him with a look he couldn't decipher. Hey there," Jake said, raising his hand slowly. "I come in peace. My ship kinda broke down." One of the guards stepped forward and said something that sounded like wind chimes and singing. Jake shook his head and tapped his earpiece. The universal translator was fried, naturally. "Don't suppose any of you guys speak English?" he tried, flashing what he hoped was a friendly smile. The guards just looked at each other. At least he thought they did. It was tough to tell with those prism eyes. Then the group parted, and Jake completely forgot how to breathe. She moved like liquid starlight. Every step was graceful and seemed to defy gravity. While the guards were intimidating, she was breathtaking. Her skin had that same silvery gold shimmer, but hers leaned toward a warm rose gold. What he guessed was her hair was a cascade of glowing strands that floated around her head as if underwater, framing a face that was both alien and stunningly beautiful. She wore a gown that seemed to be stitched together from a captured nebula, and it flowed around her like smoke. But her eyes were what floored him. They were shaped more like a human's, not faceted like the guards, and they held entire galaxies of color. Deep purples that melted into soft greens and blues. She looked at him with the focused curiosity of a scientist who'd just discovered a new species. When she finally spoke, her voice was like music, but the words were still nonsense to him. Jake knew he had to say something, anything. And that's when his brain, deciding this was the perfect moment to short-circuit, offered up the single worst thing he could possibly say. "Hey, babe," he managed, a crooked grin spreading across his face. He instantly wanted the ground to swallow him whole. Of all the first contact procedures he'd ever learned, hitting on the alien princess, and she had to be royalty, was definitely not on the list. The reaction was immediate, but not at all what he expected. Her cheeks flushed a deep rose gold, and her jewel-like eyes went wide. She brought a delicate hand to her chest, and then, in perfectly clear, slightly accented English, she whispered, "Yes, baby." The silence that fell was so thick you could have sliced it with a laser. Jake's jaw hit the floor. The guards shuffled their feet, suddenly looking incredibly uncomfortable. Clearly, they'd understood him the whole time, and the princess, or whatever she was, looked absolutely horrified by what had just come out of her own mouth. You speak English?" Jake stammered. She drew herself up, trying to regain her regal composure, but the blush wasn't going anywhere. "We have studied your transmissions. Your entertainment programs travel very far." She tilted her head. "Though I may have misunderstood the proper context for certain phrases." Jake almost laughed at how insane this all was, but he held it back. No, you got the context right. It's me. I shouldn't have said it. I mean, I crash my ship on your planet, and the first thing I do is—" He raked a hand through his messy brown hair. "I'm Jake Morrison, and I'm so sorry about that." "I am Lirelei," she said, and her name sounded like a melody. "Third daughter of the crystalline throne, princess of the Athelian Empire." She gestured vaguely at the guards. "You have arrived in our space at a very complicated time." As if on cue, another group of aliens arrived on the platform. This new bunch wore fancy robes instead of armor, and their expressions were a mix of curious and openly hostile. An older male whose skin was the color of polished copper strode forward and began speaking to Lirelei in that musical language. Jake didn't get the words, but he got the tone. Angry, worried, and full of something that sounded a lot like threats. Lirelei answered him calmly, but Jake saw her hands clench inside the folds of her gown. When they finished, the copper-skinned alien glared at Jake. "Human," he said, his English thick with contempt. "Your presence here is a problem. You will come with us." "Now just a minute," Jake began, but Lirelei held up a hand. "Please," she said to him quietly. "As my guest, you are under my protection. But you have to understand, your arrival makes a delicate situation much worse." Jake glanced from her worried face to the hostile officials. "Look, lady, I just want to fix my ship and get out of your light strands. Whatever political mess you've got going on, count me out." One of the officials let out a laugh that sounded like shattering glass. "You became involved when you addressed the princess with such familiarity. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Counselor Zax," Lirelei's voice was sharp. "The human is obviously not aware of our customs." Zax's eyes glittered. "Ignorance is no excuse, Your Highness. He spoke the bonding words, in public, by law." "By law, nothing is final," Lirelei snapped, cutting him off. "We will handle this in the proper chambers, not on a landing pad like a bunch of street vendors." Jake's head was spinning. "Bonding words? What in the world are you talking about?" Lirelei turned to him, and for the first time he saw a crack in her composure, a hint of vulnerability in those incredible eyes. In our culture, some phrases have enormous power, especially when said between compatible individuals. They can trigger ancient rituals. "Compatible individuals?" Jake repeated, feeling faint. "Your species and mine are just genetically similar enough for the old laws to apply," Counselor Zax said with a sneer. "Though why the founders would include such a primitive—" "Enough," Lirelei commanded, and to Jake's surprise, everyone fell silent. She looked back at him. "You need to come with us. I promise I will explain everything, but not out here. There are too many eyes, too many ears." Jake looked past the officials and saw for the first time that a crowd had gathered on nearby balconies and floating platforms. Aliens of all shapes and sizes were staring, their expressions ranging from awe to suspicion. Little hovering drones that looked like metal insects were filming the whole thing. "My ship," Jake started. "It will be taken care of," Lirelei promised. "Please, trust me." There was a sincerity in her voice, a real concern that made Jake give a slow nod. "All right, Princess. Lead the way." They walked through the city in a procession that felt way too much like a parade. Jake tried to wrap his head around the impossible world around him. Buildings that seemed to grow like trees, transport pods zipping through tubes of liquid light, and aliens everywhere, all stopping to gawk at the human who'd literally fallen from the sky. Lirelei walked right beside him, close enough for him to catch her scent. It was like roses after a rainstorm. "I'm sorry for all this," she said, her voice low. "You couldn't have known what you were saying." "So you want to fill me in now?" Jake asked, giving a polite nod to a group of young aliens who were pointing at his flight suit. "The phrase you used, 'Hey babe.' It is almost identical to the words of an ancient bonding rite from before we traveled the stars. When spoken to someone of royal blood, it starts a courtship protocol that—" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "That has serious political consequences." Jake almost stumbled. "Courtship? You mean like dating?" "Much more than that," she confessed. "When the person responds positively, as I accidentally did, it signals a desire to explore a permanent bond. A bond of marriage. And I'm guessing some people aren't happy about their princess possibly getting married to some random human who crashed his junker on their lawn." Lirelei's laugh was quiet and sad. "You learn quickly. I am already promised to someone else. A political marriage meant to keep the peace between our empire and the Void Collective. My response to you has just given my enemies a weapon to use against me." Imagine getting arrested for a bad pickup line. That's basically what happened to Jake, except his jail was a palace that seemed to defy the laws of physics. They walked into a place that shouldn't exist, with hallways that twisted back on themselves and rooms that were somehow bigger on the inside. Veins of living crystal pulsed with a soft light from the walls, seeming to brighten as the princess, Lyra, passed by. You won't believe what happens when a simple cargo pilot gets tangled up with an alien princess and a 1,000-year-old war, so stick around. Suddenly, a servant materialized, bowing low. "Your Highness, the Emperor is waiting in the throne room of Echoes." Lyra's face went rigid. "Of course he is," she whispered, then turned to Jake. "That's my father. He's going to size you up, decide if you're a pawn or a problem." "Fantastic," Jake mumbled. "Any tips?" Jake asked. "Be yourself," she said, but then quickly added, "But maybe," with less slang. The throne room of Echoes was no joke. Every single sound, even their breathing, bounced off invisible surfaces, creating a swirling symphony of whispers that made the hair on Jake's arms stand up. And in the center of it all sat the Emperor. In that instant, Jake understood where Lyra got her commanding presence. The man was ancient, but not in a way you could count in years. His skin shimmered like polished starlight. His eyes held the weight of entire galaxies, and when he finally spoke, the universe itself seemed to lean in to listen. And his English was flawless, with no trace of an accent. "You are the human," he said, his voice calm and deep, "who spoke the old words to my daughter." Jake figured a bow couldn't hurt. "Your Majesty, it was a complete accident. I swear I meant no disrespect." "Accidents," the Emperor mused, a faint smile playing on his lips, "often reveal more truth than our intentions." He studied Jake with those impossibly old eyes. "Tell me, human, what do you know of the Etherean Empire?" "Honestly, nothing until about an hour ago," Jake admitted. "I'm just a cargo pilot who took a wrong exit in hyperspace." "A cargo pilot?" the Emperor echoed, a hint of disbelief in his tone. And yet you fly a heavily modified fighter with military-grade shielding. How curious. Jake kept his face a perfect mask of innocence. It's a rough galaxy. Sometimes the cargo needs a little extra protection. Indeed, the Emperor leaned back. And what precisely was this cargo you were carrying when your drive mysteriously failed? Information, Jake said, choosing his words carefully. Encrypted data files. I don't know the contents. That's not part of my job description. And whose job was it? Jake paused for a long moment. I'd really rather not say. The Emperor's smile was not friendly. Loyalty. An admirable trait, if a bit foolish, he said. And with a wave of his hand, shimmering holographic screens filled the air around them. Your timing is interesting, Jake Morrison. Our empire is at a turning point. Old enemies are circling, and old friendships are cracking under the pressure of change. And then there is my daughter. He glanced at Lyra with a look that almost seemed like sadness. My daughter carries the burden of peace on her shoulders. Her upcoming marriage to Prince Cathrax of the Void Collective is the only thing preventing a war that could incinerate 1,000 star systems. And then you appear, the Emperor continued, his gaze locking back onto Jake, speaking words that have been silent in these halls for millennia, and she answers you, as if the cosmos itself arranged this meeting. Father, Lyra started to protest, but he silenced her with a raised hand. I am not done. The Emperor rose to his feet, and Jake's jaw dropped as he realized the man was easily 9 feet tall. My chief advisor, Zarthus, believes you are a spy, sent to sabotage our negotiations. Others see you as an opportunity, a sign that humanity is finally ready to join the galactic stage. A few even believe you are a divine omen. And what do you see? Jake asked, his own boldness surprising him. The Emperor's smile grew wider. I see a young man who is either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Possibly both. He glided down from his throne with a dancer's grace. You will stay here, as our guest, while we figure out what to do with you. Lyra will teach you our customs, to ensure there are no more incidents. Father, I really don't think... Lyra protested. It is decided, the Emperor stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. Unless, of course, you wish to formally reject his words in front of the entire court. Lyra fell silent, a deep blush coloring her cheeks. I thought not. The Emperor turned back to Jake. You need to understand something, human. You have just walked into a game where the rules were written before your species even discovered fire. Play carefully, or you'll end up as a forgotten casualty in a political war you can't even begin to understand. And with that, he swept out of the room, his followers trailing behind him like the tail of a comet. Jake and Lyra were left alone in the echoing silence. Well, Jake finally broke the quiet. That went better than I expected. Lyra stared at him, dumbfounded. Better? You've been branded as a potential spy or a cosmic prophecy. You're trapped on a planet you've never heard of, and you're caught in the middle of a political mess that could trigger an interstellar war. Yeah, Jake countered with a shrug. But I'm not dead. Plus, I get a princess for a tour guide. Could be worse. In spite of everything, a laugh escaped Lyra's lips. It was a beautiful sound, like tiny silver bells ringing on a summer breeze. You are a very strange man, Jake Morrison. You have no idea, Princess. She looked at him for a long moment, a thoughtful expression on her face, and then she made up her mind. Come on, she said. If you're going to survive here, you need to understand exactly what you've walked into. She hesitated for a second. And maybe you can help me figure out why the universe is so determined to make my life this complicated. As she led him deeper into the impossible palace, Jake couldn't help but feel that his stupid joke had kicked a hornet's nest the size of a galaxy. The only question was whether he'd live long enough to see the fallout, but back in the shadows of the throne room, Advisor Zarthus was already speaking quietly into a hidden communicator. Yes, the human is here. No, the princess did not reject the bonding words. There was a pause. I understand. The contingency plan is already in motion. The alliance with the Void Collective cannot be allowed to fail, he whispered. No matter the cost. The game, just as the Emperor had warned, had already begun. And Jake Morrison, cargo pilot turned accidental suitor, was about to find out how deadly galactic chess could be. The palace's entertainment sector was like nothing Jake could have ever dreamed up. Crystal towers spiraled into the sky, holding theaters where actors performed in mid-air, floating through holographic worlds that changed based on their emotions. Lyra had taken him there right after the stressful meeting with her father, saying he needed to grasp their culture if he had any hope of surviving. We get some of your Earth entertainment out here, you know? Lyra mentioned as they strolled down a promenade where alien musicians played instruments that literally painted colors into the air. We've studied your movies, your music, your... what are they called? Memes? Jake laughed. Okay, that explains how you understood my terrible pickup line. It wasn't terrible, she said softly, then quickly corrected herself. I mean, from a purely anthropological standpoint, it was fascinating to hear such informal language used in a formal greeting. Right, anthropological, Jake smirked as she tried to cover her tracks. So, Princess, what am I supposed to be doing here, other than trying not to start any more intergalactic incidents? Lyra stopped by a fountain that flowed straight up, defying gravity. The water sculpted itself into amazing shapes, dancers, dragons, even entire battle scenes replaying in liquid form. Officially, she said, you're here to help us get a better understanding of human culture before we begin formal first contact talks. And unofficially, she quickly scanned the area to make sure no one was listening too closely. Unofficially, you're a problem my father hasn't figured out how to solve yet. Some members of the court want you thrown out immediately. Others want to use you as a weapon against me. Against you? Why would... Jake trailed off as the pieces clicked into place. The arranged marriage. Prince Kethrax arrives in 7 days, Lyra confirmed, her voice heavy. The wedding is supposed to unite our empires and stop a war that's been simmering for generations. But if it looks like I have some kind of connection with you, she continued, it could give him a reason to back out of the alliance. And that would be bad. Catastrophic, she corrected, turning to face him. Jake was once again struck by how otherworldly beautiful she was. Billions of lives are riding on this union. Entire star systems will be turned to ash if our empires go to war. No pressure then, Jake said, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, Lyra, I get it. I'll just play the role of the clueless human tourist. I'll keep my head down and stay out of your way until my ship is repaired. I wish it were that simple, she sighed, motioning for him to follow her into a smaller, more secluded building. The bonding words, once they're spoken and answered, they trigger certain expectations. The place was a private viewing room, where history came to life in stunningly realistic holograms all around them. With a wave of her hand, the room was filled with the images of her ancient ancestors. 10,000 years ago, she explained, my people almost wiped themselves out in a massive civil war. The bonding words were created as a way to build peace, like sacred promises that were more important than politics. When spoken between two compatible people, they started a period of exploration, where both sides would find out if they were truly meant for each other. Jake watched as holographic couples moved through complex, synchronized rituals that looked like a beautiful dance. So when I said, "Are you a parking ticket? 'Cause you've got fine written all over you," and you replied, he started, I accidentally triggered ancient protocols that haven't been used for centuries. Lyra's skin flushed a deep shade of rose gold. By law, we now have to spend time together. We have to share meals, have conversations, share experiences. The entire court will be watching us, trying to decide if this bond is real or if it can be officially dismissed. Can't you just tell them it was a mistake? Jake asked. Not without admitting that I lack good judgment and self-control. My political enemies would use that against me to argue that I'm not fit to be a leader. She touched a control, and the holograms shifted to show horrifying images of war and destruction, entire planets burning. This, she said softly, is what will happen if the Alliance fails. So you get it now, right? Why every single move we make is being watched under a microscope? Lyra asked, her gaze sweeping over the wreckage. The weight of it all settled on Jake's shoulders like a lead blanket. So what's the plan? He asked. We play their game, Lyra said, her voice flat. We go through all the motions, give the court the little show they want, and in 7 days, I officially break our bond so I can marry Thrax. That sounded simple, but the thought of it sent a weird pang through Jake's chest. And what exactly do these motions involve? Before she could even answer, the doors to the chamber flew open. A young alien woman, her skin flickering through a rainbow of colors, a dead giveaway for extreme distress, burst into the room. "Lyra!" the newcomer shouted, then froze when she saw Jake. "Oh, the human's here." Lyra sighed. "Jake, this is my sister Thoroughly. Thyra, this is the one who said the bonding words." "Yeah, I heard," Thyra said, circling Jake like a shark. Her bug-like, multifaceted eyes scanned him from head to toe. "He's smaller than I pictured. Are all humans this compact?" "I prefer efficiently designed," Jake shot back. Thyra let out a laugh that sounded like wind chimes in a tornado. "Oh, I like him. Way more fun than that stuffed shirt Thrax." She turned back to Lyra. "You know the entire court is losing its mind, right? Zex is demanding they kick the human out immediately. He claims you're obviously a spy sent here to wreck the Alliance." "Zex sees spies hiding under his bed," Lyra said with a wave of her hand. "Maybe, but he's not the only one. Lord Vex is convinced you're an assassin. Lady Crystalline thinks you're a smooth-talking con artist." Thyra's face lit up with mischief. "And the High Priestess? She thinks the universe sent you as Lyra's one true soulmate." Lyra groaned. "Oh, not that prophecy garbage again." "What prophecy?" Jake couldn't help but ask. "Ancient scriptures talk about bonds that cross species, unions that can literally reshape the galaxy," Thyra explained, obviously loving how uncomfortable her sister was getting. "Some people think a real cross-species bond could kick off a whole new era of peace and unity. Or it could start a holy war," Lyra added darkly. "The fundamentalists see unions like ours as an offense against nature." "Fun group," Jake muttered. "So I'm either a spy, an assassin, a con artist, or some kind of chosen one. Are there any other options on the table?" "You could just be an idiot who crashed his ship on the wrong planet," Thyra offered with a grin. "I like that one. Let's go with that." The two sisters shared a look, a whole conversation passing between them in a split second. Finally, Thyra let out a dramatic sigh. "Fine, I'll help, but only because watching Zex's face turn that weird shade of purple-green is my favorite hobby." "Help with what?" Jake asked. "The protocols, obviously," Thyra said. "The first one is tonight. It's a formal dinner where you get presented to the court. You'll have to prove you have basic compatibility, shared interests, personalities that don't clash. Basically, that you can manage not to completely humiliate my sister." "What? I'm being helpful," Thyra insisted, turning back to Jake. "Can you dance?" Sure. I mean, I can do human dancing. Probably not the crazy gravity-defying stuff you guys do here." "We'll make it work," Thyra said, clapping her hands. Instantly, several servants appeared out of nowhere. "Take the human to the guest suites. He needs something proper to wear tonight. Something that says, 'I'm not a spy, but I just might be cosmically important.'" Before Jake could even argue, the servants had him surrounded and were guiding him out of the room. He managed to catch Lyra's eye for a second, and she mouthed the words, "I'm sorry," just as he was swept around a corner. The guest quarters were nicer than any place Jake had ever stayed in his life. The bed was just floating 3 feet off the floor, held up by some kind of personal gravity field. The walls were like one-way mirrors looking out over the incredible alien city, but they turned solid and private with a simple touch. The bathroom was more like a 5-star spa, filled with fixtures he couldn't even guess the function of. "The clothing fabricator is this way," a servant said, leading him to a small alcove with a holographic display. "Just stand in the circle, and the system will scan your measurements." Jake did what he was told, trying not to jump as harmless beams of light mapped out every inch of his body. The interface beeped and showed him a few outfit choices that brilliantly mixed human and alien styles. "That one," Jake said, pointing to a design that looked like a sleek tuxedo crossed with ceremonial armor. It looked formal, but not silly, with little details that honored both of their cultures. The fabricator whirred to life, and in just a few minutes, Jake was wearing a perfectly tailored outfit. The material felt almost alive, constantly adjusting its temperature to keep him perfectly comfortable. He glanced in the mirror and had to admit, he looked pretty sharp. A soft chime announced he had a visitor. Jake opened the door and found an old Etheran male, his skin the color of dark, polished copper. "Master Morrison," the alien said in flawless English. "I am Sage KX, advisor to the royal family. I was asked to help you prepare for this evening's dinner." "Prepare me how?" KX walked in, holding a device that projected glowing, holographic figures into the air. "Etheran court etiquette is complicated. One wrong hand gesture could be taken as an insult. Or worse, a declaration of war. We have 3 hours to make sure you don't accidentally start an interstellar conflict." What came next was the most intense crash course Jake had ever taken. He learned that touching your throat while you speak means you're lying, that you have to refuse food 3 times to be polite, but refusing a 4th time is a fatal insult, and complimenting someone's skin color could either be the highest form of praise or a reason for a duel, depending on the time of day. "This is insane," Jake said after learning the 12th contradictory rule. "How does anyone make it through a single meal without offending the entire room?" "Practice," KX said plainly, "and a very healthy fear of the consequences. Now, about the dance." "The dance?" "The Harmony of Souls. It is tradition for potential bondmates to perform it at their first public gathering. It's meant to show your connection and mutual respect." KX made the holograms start moving in a complex, flowing pattern. It was like a mix of ballet and a martial art, with the partners weaving around each other in ways that seemed to bend the laws of physics. "I'm going to break my neck," Jake stated. "Nonsense. The gravity stabilizers in the floor will adjust for your species' limitations. You simply have to trust your partner." KX looked at him, his eyes seeming to peer right through him. "You do trust Princess Lyra, don't you?" It was a trap, a loaded question, and Jake knew it. "I literally just met her. And yet, you spoke the bonding words." "That was an accident." "Was it?" KX's gaze was filled with an ancient, knowing wisdom. "In my long life, I've learned the universe doesn't really do accidents of this size. Maybe you should think about why. Out of all the words in your language, those were the ones that popped into your head." Before Jake could even think of a reply, another chime rang out. It was time for dinner. The grand dining hall was a masterpiece of organized chaos. Hundreds of Etherans in dazzling outfits moved through a space that felt like it existed in more than one dimension at once. Tables floated at various heights, linked by bridges made of pure light. The ceiling was a live feed of the cosmos, with galaxies and stars spinning by in fast motion. Jake walked in with KX, trying his best not to stare like a tourist. A silence fell over the massive room as all eyes landed on him, quickly followed by a storm of whispers. "Stay calm," KX murmured beside him. "They are testing you from the second you walk in. Don't show fear, but don't show aggression either." Jake put on his best poker face and followed KX through the throng of aliens. His newly repaired translator earpiece started picking up snippets of conversations. "Smaller than I expected. Clearly a trick by the progressives. I heard he's already teaching her human mating rituals." That last comment made Jake nearly trip over his own feet. KX caught his arm, his grip surprisingly strong for someone who looked so old. They finally reached the main table, where the Emperor was seated with Lyra at his right. She looked absolutely stunning in a gown that seemed woven from a living nebula, shimmering between deep purples and bright silvers. When her eyes met Jake's, he saw a flash of something. Was it relief? Worry? It vanished before he could be sure. "Jake Morrison," the Emperor's voice boomed, reaching every corner of the hall. "Our unexpected guest. Come, sit. Let us get to know the human who speaks our ancient words." Jake slid into his seat, which was right across from Lyra. On his left was Counselor Zex, who looked at Jake like he was something scraped off a boot. The empty chair on his right was quickly taken by Kayaks. "The first course," a servant announced, and plates shimmered into existence in front of everyone. Jake stared down at what looked like a salad made of glowing, crystallized light, and frantically tried to remember which fork he was supposed to use. "The prismatic fork," Lyra whispered, giving a tiny, almost invisible nod toward the right one. "Thanks," Jake mumbled, carefully poking a piece of the crystal light. It dissolved on his tongue with a taste like sunshine and fresh mint, an explosion of flavors he didn't even have words for. "Tell us, human," Counselor Zex said, his voice loud enough for the whole table to hear. "What kind of cargo were you hauling that required so many illegal modifications on your ship?" Jake chewed his food slowly, giving himself a moment to think. "I'm not sure I'd call them illegal, Counselor. My ship is up to code with all Terran Federation regulations." "But not galactic ones," Zex shot back. "Your shielding, for example. It's military grade, designed to make you invisible to our sensors. Why would a simple cargo pilot need something like that?" "It's a dangerous universe out there," Jake said calmly. "Pirates don't ask if you're carrying medicine or weapons. They just want to know if you're an easy target." "And are you an easy target, Master Morrison?" Zex sneered. Jake looked him dead in the eye. "Well, I'm sitting here, aren't I? You tell me." A few chuckles rippled through the nearby tables. Jake even saw the corner of the Emperor's mouth twitch. "You've got a bold tongue for someone in such a weak position," Zex noted. "I've found that being too careful when you're in a weak position just makes things worse," Jake replied. "Besides, I've got nothing to hide. My ship's logs are open for inspection. My cargo manifest is clean, and I'm happy to cooperate with any investigation you deem necessary." A new voice, smooth as polished glass, cut through the room. How refreshingly direct. Lady Crystalline leaned forward from her seat down the table, her skin shimmering just like her name. "Tell me, Master Morrison, what are your thoughts on our princess?" The entire hall went dead silent. This was obviously another test. Jake glanced at Lyra, who was suddenly fascinated by her plate. "I think," he said, choosing his words carefully, "that Princess Lyra is someone who puts her people's needs way above her own. That kind of selflessness is rare, no matter what species you are." "Diplomatic," Lady Crystalline noted with a slight smile. "But that's not what I asked. The bonding words suggest a more personal attraction." "The bonding words were an accident," Jake stated firmly. "A complete misunderstanding between our cultures. I meant no disrespect to the princess or your traditions." "And yet," she responded. Lord Vex shot back from across the hall. "The words only have power if both people feel the connection. Are you suggesting our princess was mistaken?" It was a perfect trap. He could either admit to feelings he had no business having, or he could imply that Lyra had made a fool of herself. He could feel hundreds of eyes digging into him, just waiting for him to slip up. "I'm saying," Jake said, treading carefully, "that in that moment, two people from different worlds felt a genuine connection. Whether that was some cosmic event or just two kindred spirits recognizing each other, I really can't say. But I don't believe a genuine connection is ever a mistake, no matter how many complications it might cause." The silence in the room felt like it stretched for an eternity. Then Lyra's voice rang out, clear and steady. "Well said, Master Morrison. Perhaps there's some wisdom in your species after all." Just like that, the tension snapped, and the buzz of conversation filled the hall again. Out of the corner of his eye, Jake saw KX give him an approving nod. The meal carried on for another 7 courses, each one more ridiculously elaborate than the last. Jake somehow managed to get through it all without a major screw-up, though he nearly started an interstellar incident by complimenting the soup's temperature during the wrong lunar phase. Finally, as servants cleared the last of the plates, the Emperor rose to his feet. "And now," he announced, "as tradition demands, we shall witness the harmony of souls." The floor of the dining hall started to move. Tables floated silently to the sides, opening up a huge circular space in the middle. Musicians, if you could call beings who played instruments that literally warped reality musicians, began a melody that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Lyra stood up gracefully and descended to the dance floor. She looked up at Jake, her expression expectant. "Remember," KX whispered in his ear, "trust your partner." Jake got to his feet, which suddenly felt like they were made of jelly, and walked down to join her. The entire court formed a circle around them, their faces perfect masks of polite curiosity, hiding razor-sharp judgment. "I am definitely going to embarrass you," Jake muttered as Lyra took his hands. Her touch was cool, her skin surprisingly soft for something that looked like polished metal. "No," she said, her voice full of confidence. "You're not." The music swelled, and Lyra started to move, leading Jake through the first few steps. The gravity adjusters KX had mentioned kicked in, and suddenly Jake felt light on his feet, more graceful than he had ever been in his entire life. They circled each other, their hands touching and then parting, their bodies weaving through patterns that grew more and more complex. Jake was stunned to find himself anticipating her moves, matching her step for step. When she spun, he was right there to catch her. When he leaped, actually leaped, in a way that defied physics, she guided his landing with just the slightest touch. The dance became more intense, more intimate. They were moving like a single being with 2 bodies, the music no longer leading them, but flowing from their movements. Jake completely forgot about the crowd watching them. His entire universe was the woman in his arms, who moved like starlight brought to life. The final move required absolute, blind trust. Lyra would fall backward, and Jake had to catch her, spinning her in a motion that would either be breathtakingly graceful or a total disaster. She fell without a hint of hesitation. Jake caught her perfectly, spinning her up and around until she was pressed against his chest, their faces just inches apart. Her eyes were wide, full of surprise and something else, something that made his heart pound for reasons that had nothing to do with the dance. For a moment, the music stopped. They stood there frozen, breathing hard, completely lost in each other's eyes. Then the applause erupted, and the spell was broken. They separated, bowing first to the audience and then to each other. Jake couldn't decipher the expressions on most of the alien faces, but he saw Thyra grinning like a wild person, and even the Emperor looked thoughtfully impressed. "Interesting," was all the Emperor said before he dismissed the court. As the crowd began to thin out, Counselor Zex materialized at Jake's elbow. "An impressive performance," he said, but his tone was dripping with sarcasm. "One might almost think you'd practiced." "Just good chemistry, I guess," Jake shot back. Zex's eyes narrowed into tiny slits. "Chemistry? Yes? How convenient." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a low hiss. "Enjoy your little game, human. But remember, in 7 days, she marries Cathrax. Whatever fantasy you're spinning in your head ends right there." He swept away before Jake could even think of a reply. "Don't let him get to you," Lyra said, appearing at his side. "Zex sees threats behind every corner." "Is he wrong?" Jake asked. "Am I a threat?" Lyra studied him for a long moment. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I'm starting to think that might not be such a bad thing." Before Jake could ask what she meant, Thyra bounced over, practically vibrating with excitement. "That was amazing! Did you see Counselor Zex's face when you caught her? I thought his eyes were going to pop right out of his head." She grabbed both of their hands. Come on. The night is young, and there's so much we have to show our human friend before… She cut herself off, but Jake heard the unspoken part loud and clear. Before the week was over. Before Lyra married someone else. Before whatever this was between them had to end. As they were leaving the grand hall, Jake caught his reflection in a polished wall. He looked different. It wasn't just the alien clothes or the lingering feeling of the gravity dance. Something in his eyes had changed. He was starting to care about Lyra, about this world, about this insane game he'd been dropped into. And that, he realized, might be the most dangerous thing of all. The next morning found Jake on a balcony overlooking the Crystal Gardens. He was nursing a glass of what the Athetherans called harmony wine, which felt a whole lot like a hangover with a fancy name. The three suns were just beginning to rise, painting the sky in colors that had no business existing. "You look troubled," Lyra said, joining him at the railing. She was in simpler clothes today, if you could call a dress that seemed to shift between being a solid and a liquid simple. "Just thinking," Jake said. "Your counselor laid it out for me last night. 7 days, and this is all over." 6 days now, Lyra corrected him softly. "And yes, it must end. This alliance will save billions of lives." "I know." Jake turned to face her. "But what about your life? Doesn't that count for anything?" Lyra's skin shimmered through a few different colors before settling on a deep purple laced with silver. "I am the third princess of the Athetheran Empire. My life has never really been my own." "That's not what I asked," he insisted. She was quiet for a long time, watching the gardens below, where crystalline flowers hummed in a gentle chorus. "When I was young," she said at last, "I dreamed of exploring the galaxy, of being the first to contact new species, of adventure and discovery. Instead, I learned trade agreements by heart and practiced my diplomatic smile." "So you gave up on your dreams?" "I adapted them to fit reality." She looked at him with those incredible eyes. "Just like you adapted from whatever you were before, to become a cargo pilot who flies military-grade ships." Jake managed a wry smile. "Touché. So are you going to tell me?" she asked. "Your real story?" Jake thought about it. In his line of work, trust was a liability, but something about Lyra made him want to be completely honest for once. "I was military, special operations, the kind of missions they don't put in the history books. I got tired of following orders that got good people hurt for bad reasons. So I got out, took my skills to the private sector. Running cargo pays pretty well when the cargo is sensitive and the routes are dangerous." "And the information you were carrying when you crashed?" "Honestly, I have no idea. My client was paranoid, even for the black market. Paid me triple the going rate for a blind run. No questions, no scans, just get it from point A to point B." Jake let out a bitter laugh. "Guess I'll never know now. The data cores were melted slag by the time I crash landed." Lyra studied his face. "You're not a spy. How can you be so sure?" "Because a real spy would have a much better cover story," she said, and her smile completely transformed her face. "Also, Thyra gave you an extensive scan last night. Her hobby is xenobiology, and she was very thorough. That's mildly terrifying. You should see her laboratory. She has samples from over 1,000 different species." Lyra's expression turned serious again. "Jake, there's something you need to know. The dinner last night wasn't just about testing you. It was about testing me." "What do you mean?" "There are groups here at court who are against the alliance with the Void Collective. They see Kathrax as a threat to our way of life. They were watching to see if you could be used as an alternative." "An alternative to what? To stop a war? How would that even work?" "If I were to formalize our bond," she explained, "make our connection official, it would create a huge diplomatic incident. It could delay or even cancel the marriage agreement." She held up a hand to stop him from speaking. "Which I will not do," The cost is far too high. But they don't know that. She gave a tiny nod. I agree, which means we're both targets now. As if on cue, a massive explosion tore through the palace. The entire balcony lurched violently, and alarms started screaming at a pitch that made Jake's fillings buzz. Don't move, Lyra ordered, her whole vibe flipping from pampered princess to hardened warrior in a split second. Not a chance, Jake retorted, scrambling to keep up as she sprinted back inside. They found absolute chaos at the blast site. A chunk of the palace's outer wall was just gone. Royal guards were pinned down, fighting these terrifying robotic things that moved like silver mercury and shot lasers that simply vaporized anything they hit. Assassin drones, Lyra gasped, breathless. But our shields are impenetrable. It was an inside job, Jake said instantly, his old military instincts taking over. Someone had to have lowered them for this to happen. Just then, one of the drones whipped around, its red sensor locking right onto them. Jake didn't even think. He just acted, tackling Lyra behind a huge marble pillar as a beam of pure energy sliced through the air where they'd just been standing. We have to go, he said, his voice low. They aren't just shooting randomly. They're trying to corner people. This is a snatch and grab. They're after me, Lyra realized, her eyes wide. If they capture or kill me before the wedding, the entire alliance collapses. Yeah, I'm starting to get that, Jake muttered, peeking around the pillar. 6 of them, standard V formation. They're guarding something in the middle, he noted. A much larger drone was hovering right in the center of the others, its underside glowing with a containment field. Definitely a capture mission, Jake confirmed. Your Highness, this way! Captain Nexar of the Royal Guard suddenly appeared with a squad of soldiers, motioning for them to follow. They took off, running through the palace corridors, but every nerve in Jake's body was screaming at him that something was off. The path they were taking, it led away from the reinforced safe rooms. It's a trap, Jake yelled, but it was too late. Captain Nexar spun around, his blaster aimed squarely at Lyra. I'm sorry, Princess, he said, his face grim, but the old ways must be protected. Nexar! Lyra's voice was ice, completely unshaken by the betrayal. You've served my family for decades. And that is precisely why I'm doing this, he countered. This alliance will poison everything our culture stands for. A war is better than corruption. Drop your weapons, a calm voice said. Everyone turned to look at Jake. He was holding a small, sleek pistol, Nexar's sidearm, which he'd smoothly lifted during the chaos. Remember that military training I mentioned? It comes in handy. You have 1 pistol against 6 of my men, Nexar scoffed. This clip holds 7 plasma rounds. 6 targets, Jake said, like he was discussing the weather. The math seems pretty good from where I'm standing. You'd throw your life away for a princess you just met yesterday? Apparently I'm just full of surprises, Jake replied, his aim rock steady. Now, everyone's going to put their guns down, nice and easy, or we're all about to find out just how good a shot I am. The hallway was dead silent. Suddenly, another woman's voice rang out. There you are, Jake! Duck! Jake didn't hesitate, yanking Lyra down with him as a new figure swept into the corridor, holding what looked like a giant weaponized tuning fork. She smacked it against the wall, and a piercing hum filled the air. The traitorous guards dropped their guns, clutching their heads and screaming before they all crumpled to the floor, out cold. Harmonic disruptor, the woman said with a grin. My own little invention. Only works on Etherian nervous systems, so you're fine, Jake. Thyra, your timing is perfect, Lyra said, getting to her feet and brushing herself off. I try my best. Also, Dad is losing his mind. Half the Royal Council wants you executed immediately. The other half wants to throw you a parade. Thyra's smile faded. This assassination attempt changes the game, Lyra. Someone out there is determined to make sure you don't have a choice in any of this. They hurried to the Emperor's command center, a room filled with holographic maps showing the scope of the attack. There were multiple breaches and coordinated strikes against their communication hubs. "They aren't just coming for Lyra," Jake observed, pointing at the tactical display. "Look at the pattern. They're targeting every single member of the royal family who voted in favor of the alliance." The Emperor turned from the map, his face like granite. "A very sharp observation, human. It appears we have a civil war on our hands." "Father?" Lyra started, but he held up a hand. "We've already identified 43 conspirators, Captain Nexar included, all from the traditionalist faction." His voice was dangerously low. "They would rather watch this empire burn than allow it to change." "What are you going to do?" Lyra asked. "What is necessary. But right now, we need to guarantee your safety. The wedding has to happen." He then fixed his gaze on Jake. "You, human, have proven to be surprisingly useful. I have a proposal for you. I'm all ears. Become Lyra's official protector until the ceremony. Your unique way of seeing things might spot threats my own people would miss." Jake glanced at Lyra, but she was deliberately looking away. "And when it's over, you'll be rewarded handsomely and set free. Your ship will be fully repaired, your record completely cleared, and you'll have the eternal gratitude of the Etherean Empire." It was a fantastic deal. A little too fantastic. "What's the catch?" The Emperor allowed himself a cold, thin smile. "You're perceptive. The catch is that you will be in constant, close contact with my daughter, while a growing number of desperate people try to kill her. A bond will form between you, whether you want it to or not. And when the day comes for her to marry Cathrax, you will have to stand by and live with whatever feelings have developed between you." "Father," Lyra protested, horrified. "I am simply being honest, daughter. The human deserves to know the truth." He looked back at Jake. "So, what is your answer?" Jake looked at Lyra. Really looked. Underneath all that royal poise, he could see she was terrified. Not of dying, but of something far worse. She was afraid of losing herself, of being trapped in a life she never got to choose. "I'll do it," he said, his voice firm. The Emperor just nodded. "Then may the cosmos have mercy on you both." The next few days were a blur of security meetings, thwarted assassination plots, and quiet, stolen moments. Jake dove into his new role as protector, channeling all the focus he once used on the battlefield. He memorized palace blueprints, found dozens of security flaws, and drove Lyra absolutely crazy with his paranoia. "Do you really need to scan my morning tea for nanotoxins?" she asked on the 4th day as he waved a small device over her cup. "After 3 attempts on your life in 3 days?" Jake shot back. "One of which involved poison in your bathwater?" "Yeah. I'm scanning everything." She let out a sigh, but she didn't argue. They fell into a strange kind of rhythm. They'd have security briefings in the morning, and in the afternoons she would teach him about her culture while he told her stories about Earth. Their evenings were spent in a comfortable silence that grew less silent each night. It was during one of those evenings, watching a double sunset from a heavily guarded balcony, that Lyra finally broke. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice so soft it was almost lost in the wind. Jake shifted closer, not quite touching her, but letting her feel his presence. "Of the assassins?" "No." She let out a bitter little laugh. "I'm scared of this, of how easy it feels. Being with you, talking with you. I've known you for 5 days, she whispered, and I can't imagine my life without you in it." "Yeah," Jake said softly. "I know the feeling." "Do you?" She turned to him, and he could see tears that looked like liquid starlight tracing paths down her cheeks. "In 2 days, I'm going to marry a man I've never even met. I will spend the rest of my life as a political pawn, producing heirs for an alliance I'm not even sure is right anymore. And the worst part, the absolute worst part of it all, is that for just a few days, you showed me what it might feel like to actually have a choice. Lyra, She held up a hand, stopping him. "Please, don't say something noble about duty. Not tonight." So he didn't. Instead, he reached out and gently took her hand, weaving his fingers through hers. Her skin was cool and felt almost like smooth metal against his own. It shouldn't have felt right, but it did. They just stood there, holding hands, watching the alien stars pop into existence, both of them knowing this was all they could ever have, and both of them wishing, more than anything, that it could be more. The attack happened later that night. Jake woke up with his internal danger sense screaming bloody murder. He instinctively rolled off the bed an instant before an energy blade hissed through the mattress where his head had just been. This time it wasn't a drone. It was a person, clad in stealth armor, who pulled the blade free for a second strike. Jake didn't give them a chance. He snatched the heavy lamp from the nightstand and swung it like a baseball bat, connecting with the assassin's head. The stealth field flickered, revealing the face of a palace servant. "Should have known," Jake grunted, ducking another swipe of the blade. "It's always the butler." The fight was short and savage. The assassin was skilled and had high-tech gear, but Jake had survived years in places where fighting fair gets you killed. By the time security burst in, the assassin was unconscious on the floor, and Jake was leaning against the wall, nursing a deep cut on his arm. "It's just a scratch," he insisted, as Lyra rushed to his side. "You're bleeding silver," she said, her voice trembling. Jake looked down. She was right. His red blood was mixing with some shimmering metallic liquid from the blade. "Huh?" he said. "That's probably not a good sign." The palace doctors confirmed his understatement. The assassin's blade had been coated with a biometallic virus, engineered to completely rewrite a person's DNA. In an Etherian, it would have been fatal in minutes, the chief physician explained. But in a human, we have no idea. Your biology is fighting it in ways we've never seen. The virus is trying to change your genetic code, but your immune system is fighting back. The result is, well, it's unprecedented. "Meaning what?" Jake asked, though he could already feel it happening. His eyesight was becoming sharper, colors brighter. He could hear conversations happening rooms away. "It means," Lyra said softly, her eyes locked on his, "that you're becoming something new. Something that is not quite human and not quite Etherian. Can you reverse it?" The physician solemnly shook her head. "The process is too far along. Trying to stop it now would almost certainly kill you." A slow, tired laugh escaped Jake's lips, surprising everyone in the room. "You know, my life has officially become a terrible sci-fi movie. I crash land on an alien planet, accidentally get engaged to a princess, land a job as her bodyguard, and now I'm turning into some kind of alien hybrid myself. What would you do in my shoes? Because honestly, this isn't funny at all," Lyra grumbled. Jake winced as another tremor of change pulsed through his body. "Come on, it's a little funny. Besides, look on the bright side. Soon I'll match the curtains." Lyra couldn't help but crack a smile, but it faded quickly. "The ceremony is tomorrow. Cathrax gets here in the morning. This doesn't change anything." "I know," Jake said, but they both knew it was a lie. Everything had changed. The virus wasn't just changing Jake's body, it was forging a biological bridge between him and Lyra. He could feel her emotions, a warm, glowing presence in the back of his mind, and judging by the way her eyes went wide, she could feel him too. "The bonding," she whispered in awe. "The virus. It's finishing what the ritual started. We're becoming truly connected." "Can we stop it?" Jake asked. "Do you want to?" He looked right into her eyes, seeing his own turmoil mirrored there. "No," he admitted quietly. "But what I want doesn't matter. You have a duty to your people." "Stop." Lyra shot to her feet. "All I ever hear about is my duty. From my father, from the council, from the entire empire. Everyone but you, until just now." She walked over to the window, gazing out at the sprawling alien city. "Do you have any idea what I want, Jake Morrison? Tell me. I want to run. I want to steal your ship and just fly, all the way to the edge of the galaxy where nobody knows about alliances or prophecies or duty. I want a chance to see who we could be without all this crushing weight on our shoulders." She spun back to face him, a fierce, beautiful fire in her eyes. "But I can't, because I'm not just Lyra. I'm the third princess, and the fate of billions rests on this." "I know," Jake said again, and this time there was no lie in it. "Tomorrow, I marry Cathrax. The alliance is secured. The war is stopped." "I know, but tonight," she stepped closer, a new resolve hardening in her gaze. "Tonight, I'm just Lyra, and you're just Jake, and maybe that's enough." Jake got to his feet, ignoring the aching protests from his transforming body. "Are you sure about this?" She didn't answer with words. She answered with a kiss. It was like grabbing a live wire, if that wire was made of starlight and pure emotion. The link between them erupted, creating a feedback loop of feelings and sensations. Jake could taste her thoughts, feel the rhythm of her heart as if it were beating in his own chest. When they finally pulled away, they were both breathless. "Well," Jake managed to say. "That was cosmic," Lyra finished for him. Then she let out a wild, free laugh. "Oh, the council is going to be absolutely furious. Your father will probably have me executed." "Probably." She kissed him again, a shorter, but just as powerful encore. "Worth it." They stayed up all night just talking and laughing, sharing their stories, their dreams, and their fears. Not as a princess and her bodyguard, not as a human and an Etherean, but as two souls who had found each other against all odds. As the first light of dawn broke, bringing the day that would change everything, they felt ready. Or at least, they thought they were. Prince Cathrax's arrival was set to unleash secrets that would rock the Empire to its core. But for those last few precious hours, Jake and Lyra had each other. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to face what was coming. The escape pod's emergency beacon was offline for 3 hours before anyone realized they were gone. By that time, Jake and Lyra were already weaving their way through the asteroid field on the edge of Etherian space. The stolen shuttle moved with incredible precision, responding to Jake's newly enhanced reflexes. "That was insane," Lyra said, catching her breath. Her skin was shifting through a rainbow of colors, a mix of excitement and terror. "Did you see Counselor Zex's face when we blew through the ceremony decorations?" "I'm pretty sure his expression went beyond the visible light spectrum," Jake shot back, nudging their course to dodge a chunk of rock. The biometallic virus had done more than just change his looks. His new, silver-tinged skin could now connect directly with Etherian tech, turning him into a ridiculously good pilot for their ships. They had bolted just hours before Prince Cathrax was due to arrive, leaving a palace in total chaos and a simple note that said, "Chose love over duty. The universe will manage." "So where are we going?" Lyra asked. Her voice made it clear she didn't really care, as long as it was far away from there. "There's a planet in the neutral zone," Jake said, pulling up the star charts. "It's called Nexus Point. It's a haven for anyone who doesn't fit in anywhere else. We're talking pirates, refugees, entrepreneurs, explorers. No extradition treaties, and no questions asked." "Sounds perfect." Lyra snuggled into the co-pilot's chair, her elaborate wedding dress looking completely out of place in the ship's stark cockpit. "How long till they catch up to us?" "Your father's probably scrambling the entire fleet as we speak." Jake did some quick math in his head, his upgraded brain crunching numbers faster than any normal human could. "But this shuttle has a few personal upgrades I made during my security checks. We've probably got a 12-hour head start." 12 hours of freedom," Lyra whispered. That's more than I've had my entire life. They flew deeper into the lawless regions of space, using the shuttle's stolen ID codes to blend in with the passing cargo ships. Jake was intensely aware of Lyra right next to him. Their biological bond was humming between them, a shared current of excitement, fear, and a spark of desire that was growing harder to ignore. "There," Jake said, pointing at a planet on his screen. "That's not Nexus Point, that's Xylos," Lyra finished. "The Dead World. It used to be a bustling colony until the Convergence War 3 centuries ago." "Why are we picking up a distress signal?" Jake cut in, his brow furrowed as he looked at the readings. "And it's recent, too. Someone down there is in deep trouble. It could be a trap." "It could be." Jake looked at her, and she met his gaze. "But we're not the kind of people who just ignore a call for help, are we?" Lyra smiled. "Guess not. Take us down." Xylos was a world-sized tombstone. The skeletons of once mighty cities littered the landscape. The war had poisoned the atmosphere, leaving the sky in a permanent twilight of ash and sorrow. Jake set the shuttle down near the signal's origin, a crashed ship, half swallowed by crystallized sand. "I've got life signs," Lyra reported from her scanner. "They're faint. But Jake, these readings don't match any known species in the galactic database. They put on their environment suits and stepped outside. The wrecked ship was ancient, built with a design that was completely alien to them. Strange symbols covered its hull, complex equations that seemed to ripple and change as they looked at them. Inside, they found the source of the distress call. "By the stars," Lyra breathed. A being was suspended in a glowing stasis field, seeming to be made of both matter and pure energy. It had a vaguely human-like form, but it also seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, with parts of it phasing in and out of reality. "Hello," a voice said, speaking directly into their minds. "I have been waiting for you." Jake instinctively raised his weapon. "Waiting for us? Or just for anyone to show up? For any who would come. But you two arriving now, that is a lucky break." The being's form grew a little more solid, revealing features that looked like a patchwork of a dozen different alien races. "I am Overseer Kai, the last of the architects." "We are the ones who built the great machines." "The great machines?" Lyra stepped forward, her scientific curiosity winning out over her fear. "You mean the planetary systems? The star forges?" "The control mechanisms," Kai corrected. "What you call governments, empires, civilizations, they are all just complex programs we designed, running on our hardware. At least until we realized our creation had become a prison." Jake and Lyra shot each other a look. "The memory control technology," Jake said slowly. "The machine that was controlling the Emperor. You built that? We built them. We scattered them across the galaxy. And we regretted them." Kai's form wavered, as if in pain. "We thought providing guidance would create harmony. Instead, we created the ultimate tools for oppression. Every major civilization in the galaxy has one now. They're buried deep, their existence forgotten, but they're still running, still controlling." "That's impossible," Lyra argued. "Our history, our culture, it's all authentic." "Your expression is authentic, but your scope is limited," Kai interrupted. "The machines don't create your culture. They just suggest boundaries. They discourage certain lines of thought and make other choices seem like the only option. Like political marriages to prevent wars that the machines themselves started," Jake said, his voice low. "Precisely. The Etherian void conflict is manufactured, a repeating pattern we programmed long ago to maintain a kind of balance through controlled conflict. Kai's focus zeroed in on them, and it felt like being put under a microscope. But you two, you are an anomaly. The bonding ritual, the virus, this connection you share, none of that was in the program. You are operating outside of the system." "So what do you want from us?" Lyra demanded. I want to give you a choice, Kai replied. A real choice, not just the illusion of one. The being gestured, and the walls of the ship turned transparent, revealing a massive underground complex. Ancient machines hummed with a deep, ominous power, with thick cables running like veins deep into the planet's core. This was our very first installation, the prototype. From this control room, I can access every single node in the galaxy. I can set every species free from their invisible cages. Or you could enslave them all, Jake pointed out. Yes, Kai admitted without hesitation. That is the burden of true choice, the risk of total, catastrophic failure. But isn't that a better option than perfect safety inside a cage you can't even see? Lyra walked over to one of the consoles. Her enhanced senses were processing streams of data that no normal person could even perceive. It's vast. Every major decision, every war, every peace treaty for centuries, all of it was influenced by these systems. Not controlled, Kai emphasized. Influenced. Nudged. The choices were still made by your people, but the menu of available choices was heavily edited. My father's obsession with the marriage, Lyra said as the terrible truth dawned on her. The reason he couldn't see any other way. It was a stronger suggestion than most. Yes, Kai confirmed. The system detected the growing conflict between your peoples and offered its standard, pre-approved solution. Imagine being handed the fate of the entire galaxy and being told you have to choose, right now. That's the insane position Jake and I found ourselves in. An ancient being, whose name was Keeney, laid it all out for us. I'm dying, it said, its voice like shifting sand. This body is failing. Someone has to decide what happens next. Keep the system, destroy it, or change it into something better. It looked right at us, two people thrown together by pure chance. You two are the first free souls I've seen in thousands of years, Jake just muttered. No pressure. Meanwhile, Larole was already diving into the data, her mind soaring through the network. She gasped, Jake, this thing, it touches everything. If we just turn it off, entire civilizations could crumble. Old wars could reignite overnight. But they'd be real wars, Jake shot back. And when peace came, it would be real peace, not some puppet show. Larole's voice was tight. Would that make the dead people feel better? A freedom really worth billions of lives? Jake's response was just as intense. Is a safe cage worth billions of souls? They just stared at each other, the weight of 1 trillion lives pressing down on them. That's when Kinney spoke again, its voice weaker now. There might be a third option. You could change the system. Instead of hidden control, you could offer open guidance, honest advice. But it would need someone to watch over it, to make sure that power isn't abused. Someone like you? Jake asked, not hiding his suspicion. I'll be gone in less than an hour, no matter what you decide. No, Kinney clarified, its gaze shifting between them. It would need someone strong enough to resist the system's temptations, wise enough to guide without controlling, and connected enough to understand all sides. The look it gave them was heavy with meaning. Us, Larry whispered, the realization dawning on her. You want us to be the new architects. I want you to choose, Kenny corrected. That's all I ever wanted, for someone to finally choose freely. Just then, the whole chamber started to shake, and dust rained down from the ceiling. Outside the clear walls, we could see warships descending from the sky. They were Athetheran military ships. They found us, Jake said grimly. Of course they did, Lyra replied, a bitter edge to her voice. The system probably led them right to us, one last try to force us back on its little pre-written path. The Emperor's voice, her father's voice, echoed from the ship's speakers. Daughter, please! Prince Cathrax is willing to forgive this mistake. The alliance can still happen. Don't throw our future away for some fleeting feeling. Fleeting? Lyra laughed, but there was no humor in it. Even now, he just doesn't get it. She turned to Jake, her eyes searching his. So what do you think we should do? Jake looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time, not as an alien princess, but as the one person in the entire universe he trusted completely. The bond between them, a freak accident that had become their greatest strength, felt solid and real. I think, he said, choosing his words carefully, that any system that tries to keep us apart is a broken system. But I also think smashing it to bits without a plan is just another way to commit galactic-scale murder. So we take Keeney's third option, Leary finished for him. We become the guardians of choice itself, together. I wouldn't want to do it any other way, he said. Keeney's fading form seemed to glow for a moment. Then touch the system, both of you, together. Let it know you are its new administrators. They placed their hands on the central console. Their unique biological connection sparked to life, and the ancient machine hummed in response, pouring its data into their minds. Jake felt his consciousness explode outwards, past his body, past the planet, connecting with every single point in the massive network. And right there beside him, sharing it all, was Lyra. They saw everything. The tiny nudges, the gentle pressures, the invisible walls that had quietly guided civilization for ages. But they also saw the absolute chaos that would erupt if it all disappeared in an instant. We have to reveal the truth slowly, Lyra sent to him through their new link. Let people get used to the idea. We'll start with the ones who are ready to listen. A coalition of the willing, Jake agreed. And what about us? She asked. We choose each other, Jake sent back, his thought firm and clear. Every single day. No system, no expectations. Just us. I can live with that, she replied. And he could feel her smile. The transfer finished just as the Athetheran soldiers burst into the chamber. Her father, the Emperor, was at the front, his face a storm of confusion and worry. Lyrai, what have you done? He demanded. I've chosen, Father, she said, her voice calm and steady. For the first time in my life, I have truly chosen. She waved a hand at the glowing machinery. This is what was choosing for you. This is what made the Alliance seem like the only path forward. But there are always other paths, if we're just brave enough to look for them. The Emperor's expression shifted from disbelief to anger, and then, finally, to a flicker of understanding. The dreams I've been having, this feeling that something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. The system's influence is already getting weaker, Jake explained. We're not destroying it, Your Majesty. We're changing it, making it a tool that people can see, that they can choose to use. An advisor, not a controller. And who gave you that right? One of the counselors sputtered, but the Emperor held up a hand to silence him. They gave themselves the right, he said, his voice quiet, by being the first ones to see the cage. He looked at his daughter as if for the first time. What do you need from us? Time, Lurley said. And understanding. And eventually, we'll need partners to help us build something better. The Emperor nodded slowly. Prince Cathrax is not going to be happy about this. Actually, Jake chimed in, quickly scanning the diplomatic channels. He's been having second thoughts about the whole arranged marriage thing, too. Turns out he's in love with his bodyguard. The system's grip is loosening everywhere. For the first time, the Emperor actually laughed. It seems the universe has a sense of humor after all. As they got ready to leave, Keeney's physical form finally started to fade away into light. Thank you, the ancient being whispered, for choosing choice itself. What will happen to you now? Lyra asked gently. I go back to the space between spaces, it replied, where all architects go, but I go freely. My duty is done. Keeney's last words were almost too quiet to hear. Love freely, choose freely, live freely, It's all any of us ever really wanted. And then, the being was gone, leaving behind only the soft hum of a machine that would now serve freedom instead of control. "So," Jake said as they walked to their shuttle, "what's next? We're the cosmic managers of free will, flying a stolen ship, and probably wanted in about 12 systems." "Now," Lyra Lee said, slipping her hand into his, "we figure out how to save the galaxy without running it. Should be simple." "Yeah, piece of cake," Jake joked. "But first, maybe we could find that beach planet you told me about. I think we've earned a little vacation." "Definitely," Larol laughed. "First, the beach. Then we save the galaxy." As their ship lifted off, leaving the planet-sized machine behind, Jake couldn't help but shake his head in wonder. A week ago, he was just a pilot hauling cargo. Now he was part human, part Athetheran, bonded to an alien princess, and the co-administrator of galactic freedom. "Hey, babe," he said, grinning over at Lyra. "Yes, baby?" she shot back, her own smile just as wide. He was right. Sometimes the universe really did have a sense of humor. The crystal towers of the Athetheran capital scraped the twilight sky as their shuttle came in for a landing. It had been 3 weeks since they inherited the architect's job. 3 weeks of carefully leaking the truth to leaders who wouldn't immediately start a war. Now it was time to face the music. "Nervous?" LRA asked, her skin flickering with different colors, a sure sign of her anxiety. "Terrified," Jake admitted. Seeing his own reflection was still weird. Human, but with silver eyes that seemed way too deep. "Your dad took it pretty well, but the whole court? That's another story." "The news about the memory manipulation has shaken everyone," Leroy said. "Half the council thinks we're heroes. The other half thinks we're monsters who brought chaos. And Counselor X has been way too quiet." Lyra frowned. "That's what worries me more than the loud ones." They were given instant permission to land, a sign of their new, bizarre status. Not quite royalty, but not prisoners either. They were something in between, and it made everyone very nervous. Thyra was waiting for them on the landing pad, practically bouncing with energy. "You're back!" she exclaimed. "Do you have any idea what you've started? It's amazing! Pure chaos!" "Thyra," Lyra warned. "Good chaos," Thyra corrected herself. "People are asking questions for the first time. Old alliances built on lies are falling apart, and new ones based on actual trust are forming. Dad had to completely change how council meetings work, because nobody can agree on anything anymore." "How's he taking it?" Jake asked. "Better than you'd think. I think he secretly likes having to actually think for himself again." But then Thyra's face got serious. "But not everyone is handling it well. There's been fighting on a few planets. The Void Collective is in the middle of a civil war." "We knew there'd be a price," Lyra said softly. "Knowing it and seeing it are two different things," Thyra said. "Come on, the emergency meeting is about to start." The throne room was jammed. Beings from dozens of worlds were packed in, all there to see the show. They were here to hear the truth about the architects, officially, from the Athetheran Empire. Jake could feel thousands of pairs of eyes on them as they walked in. He heard the whispers in 100 different languages. The hybrid. The princess who chose him. The destroyers of order. The bringers of freedom. The emperor was on his throne, but he sat differently now, less like a statue, more like a man who was actually thinking. Jake realized the system's influence had left its mark on everyone, like waking from a long dream and not being sure which of your thoughts were really your own. "Jake Morrison! Princess Lyra!" The Emperor's voice boomed across the massive hall. "You two stand here accused of threatening the very bedrock of our civilization. You claim you're here to set us free. So speak. Tell us all your truth." Lyra stepped up, and I could feel the sheer force of her will through our bond. She wasn't just a princess anymore. She was a revolutionary. "Friends, citizens, everyone watching," she began, her voice ringing with clarity. "I'm not here as your princess. I'm here as someone who finally saw the puppet strings we've all been dancing on." On cue, giant holographic screens flickered to life around the room, showing shocking images from Zafiria and streams of data that proved a terrifying fact. For centuries, their memories had been secretly controlled. We even showed them the final, dying words of the man in charge, Overseer Kane. "For thousands of years," Lyra explained, "we haven't been controlled, but guided. Pushed in certain directions, our choices quietly limited, all for the sake of so-called peace." She let that bombshell hang in the air for a second. "That time is over. The real question is, what do we do now?" And that's when the real villain of the story stepped out of the shadows. "What comes next is chaos." Counselor Zex appeared, flanked by his personal army. "You've doomed us all for a childish romance." I couldn't help but mutter, "There it is, right on time for the coup." Zex shot me a dirty look and turned to the crowd. "Don't you see? They're twisting the truth. Yes, we were influenced, but it kept us from destroying ourselves. These two would burn it all down just so they can be together." "We're not burning anything down," I shot back, moving to Lyra's side. "We're just making the system visible, so people can choose for themselves." "Choose?" Zex laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "Do you honestly think warlords will choose peace? That the greedy will choose to be fair? You're just a couple of kids who've unleashed a monster you can't control." "And you're a coward who's been hiding behind invisible chains," Lyra retorted. "Freedom is messy, yes. Some people will make bad choices." But before she could finish, a massive explosion blew out the giant windows of the throne room. Outside, ships were firing on each other right above the city, but they weren't from any known fleet. "The Void Collective!" someone screamed in terror. "They're attacking us! See?" Zex roared over the panic. "This is what happens without control! Prince Kethrax's fleet is taking what they think is theirs." The room descended into pure chaos as people scrambled for cover. But as I watched the ships, something felt off. The way they moved, their attack patterns, it was all too familiar. "That's not Kethrax," I said, a cold dread washing over me. "Lyra, look at how those ships are flying." Her eyes went wide. That's Terran Federation tactics," she whispered. "But how?" The Emperor, his face pale with sudden realization, looked right at me. "Your cargo run," he said. "The data you were carrying, it wasn't just random information, was it?" My mind started racing, connecting dots at a speed I didn't know was possible. "It was a setup," I said, the pieces clicking into place. "Someone wanted me to crash land here. Someone wanted me to meet Lyra." "And they knew about the memory controls," Lyra added. "They wanted this whole system to be exposed." Just then, a new hologram flickered to life in the middle of the room. It was a human woman, wearing the crisp uniform of a Federation admiral, her face all sharp angles and cold calculation. "Admiral Sarah Vance," I breathed. It was my old CO. "Hello, Jake," the hologram said with a chilling smile. "Glad to see you followed the plan perfectly." "You used me," I choked out. "I guided you," Vance corrected, her voice like ice. "The Federation has known about this place for decades. We've been waiting for the perfect moment to tear down the old empires and let humanity rise from the ashes." "This isn't about humanity rising," I yelled. "Isn't it?" Vance's smile was predatory. "You just exposed the weakness of every major power in the galaxy. The only ones who grew up without a technological crutch were us, humans. We are the only ones ready to lead in the chaos you've created." Lyra gasped. "The attacks, they're not real. They're false flags." You're trying to start the very wars this system was built to prevent. Wars that humanity is now uniquely positioned to win, Vance confirmed without a shred of remorse. Thank you for your service, both of you. You'll be remembered as heroes, even if you're too naive to understand what you've done. And just like that, her image vanished, leaving a terrifying silence behind. This is your fault! Zek screamed, pointing a trembling finger at us. Your selfish love has brought war to our doorstep. Enough! The Emperor's voice cut through the noise like a whip crack. He stood up, and for the first time, he seemed to radiate a power that had nothing to do with technology. Counselor Zex, you are under arrest for treason. You can't do this, Zex sputtered as guards grabbed him. I am still the Emperor, he declared, his voice firm. And for the first time in a long time, I'm going to act like it. He then turned to Lyra and me, his expression grim. What do we do now? And just like that, the most powerful man in the Empire was asking us, a disgraced princess and a human outcast, for help. We fight, I said. But not the way Vance wants us to, I continued. She thinks this chaos will break everyone down into us versus them. But we're going to show her she's wrong. Lyra picked up where I left off, her voice filled with a new strength. She sees a human and an Etherean, and expects conflict. But what she's going to get is a partnership. Nice words, Zek spat as the guards dragged him away. But words don't stop laser fire. No, I agreed, a plan forming in my mind. But the truth just might. Over the next few hours, as Vance's fake attacks tried to ignite a galactic war, Lyra and I got to work. Using our access to the very network that had controlled everyone, we started broadcasting the truth to every corner of the galaxy. To everyone listening, Lyra's voice went out on every channel. You are being lied to again. But this time, the liars want to use your newfound freedom to turn you against each other. These attacks are a lie. A human plot to make everyone fight. But fear is a powerful weapon. Worlds that were already reeling from one betrayal now faced what looked like another. Old rivalries flared up, and the galaxy started to burn. It's not enough, I said, watching the conflict maps light up like a wildfire. They're too scared. They don't know who to believe. Lyra looked at me, her eyes shining with fierce determination. Then we give them something they can believe in. Not a voice on the radio. Us. In person. What are you talking about? I asked. Her smile was equal parts terrifying and beautiful. We stop hiding. We go to the front lines of these fake wars, and we stand right in the middle of them. That's a suicide mission, I said. Maybe, she replied. Or maybe seeing a human and an Etherean standing together, refusing to fight, will be enough to remind people they have another choice. I looked at her, and in that moment I knew I would follow her anywhere. I'm always with you, but we can't be everywhere. No, a new voice said. We turned to see Thyra, Lyra's loyal bodyguard, and she wasn't alone. Behind her was the most incredible group of people I'd ever seen. A Void Collective diplomat, a defected Federation pilot, a being made of pure crystal, and others I didn't even have names for. The one thing they all had in common was a look of fierce, clear-eyed purpose. Word got out, Thyra explained. These are others like you, people who formed bonds across species, who refused to go back to the old way of hating each other. They're calling themselves the architects of choice. We stand with you, the Void diplomat said, his voice resonating with sincerity. At every flashpoint, we'll be there to stand between the warships and show them a better way. It's a long shot, I warned them. But it's our choice, the Federation defector replied with a small smile. That's what you gave all of us, right? The freedom to choose our own path, for better or for worse. I felt Lyra's hand find mine, and our bond surged with a mix of fear and overwhelming hope. This connection, born from a crash landing and forged in a revolution, was about to be tested. "Then let's choose," Lyra said, her voice full of conviction. "Let's choose to believe that when people are truly free, they will pick connection over conflict and love over fear." "And what if they don't?" Zex's voice sneered from a palace speaker. "Then at least the choice was theirs," I called back. "And we will all face what comes next, together." The days that followed were a blur. We flew from one crisis to another, a growing fleet of misfits standing as a shield between armies. Sometimes, just the sight of our united front was enough to make soldiers lower their weapons. Other times, we barely escaped with our lives. But slowly, miraculously, it started working. Vance's lies began to unravel. The real Prince Kethrax even held a press conference with his bodyguard, denouncing the attacks and calling for peace. The final showdown happened at a neutral world called Nexus Point. Vance had trapped a coalition of ships, giving them a simple choice: surrender to human rule or be destroyed. She wanted to make an example of them, to crush the last bit of hope in the galaxy. But she made one mistake. She found our little ship floating directly between her fleet and her victims. "Admiral Vance," I broadcasted, my voice steady. "I'm officially resigning. I was never your soldier." "You were always my tool, Morrison," her voice snapped back, cold and full of rage. "Every step you took was part of my plan. You think you're free? You're just running a program I wrote for you." "Maybe," I said, looking over at Lyra, who gave me a confident nod. "But it's a program I'm choosing to overwrite, right now." "Ready?" she asked, a gentle smile playing on her lips. They flew their ship right down the middle, a lone vessel between two massive war fleets, and broadcast their connection on every channel. It wasn't words this time, but the raw, unfiltered feeling of their bond, the undeniable link between a human and an Athetherian. It was living proof that unity wasn't just a dream. Ship by ship, others began to join them, peeling away from their fleets. The architects of choice were first, but then came others, people who were just sick and tired of the old hatreds and the endless programmed wars. In minutes, a third fleet had formed in the space between, belonging to neither side, but simply choosing freedom. "Fire on them," Admiral Vance ordered her command crew. "They're traitors to our species." But for the first time, her officers hesitated. And in that one moment of doubt, everything changed. "No, Admiral," one of them said, his voice firm. "They're the future." The mutiny that followed was quiet, quick, and ended without a single shot fired. Once Vance's extremist agenda was exposed for what it was, her faction found itself completely alone, even among their own people. With her iron grip gone, the Federation Council began genuine peace talks with the alien powers for the very first time. "We did it," Larole whispered, her eyes wide as she watched the warship stand down. "No," Jake corrected her gently. "We gave them the chance to do it. The choice was theirs." In the days that followed, as the galaxy stumbled toward a new future without the crutch of memory control, Jake and Lyra found themselves in a strange new role. They weren't rulers or commanders, but guides, helping entire species learn how to navigate the messy, wonderful waters of true freedom. "This is much harder than the old way," the Emperor confessed to them during one late-night strategy session. "Every single decision takes so much longer. Every alliance feels like it could break at any moment." "But they're real," Lyra pointed out, her voice soft, but sure. "They are chosen, not forced." "And that's what makes them stronger in the end," Jake added. "Maybe not easier, but definitely stronger." Of course it wasn't perfect. Some planets fell into chaos, unable to cope without the rigid systems of the architects. But others soared, unlocking abilities and ideas that had been buried for thousands of years. The galaxy got louder, messier, and more brilliantly alive than it had been since before the first memory controls were ever put in place. And at the heart of it all were two beings, one who found the other by pure chance, who kept choosing each other on purpose every single day. Jake Morrison, the human pilot whose careless words started it all, and Lyra, the Athatheran princess who dared to answer them. Together, they were living proof that the biggest changes in the universe often start with the smallest choices. "Hey, babe," Jake said one evening. They were watching the triple sunset from their apartment on Nexus Point, a station that was now a bustling hub of interspecies life. "Yes, baby," Lyra answered, the old joke still making them both smile. "Any regrets?" he asked. She thought for a moment, her skin swirling with soft, contemplative colors. "Ask me again in 1,000 years," she said, "after we see what grows from the seeds we planted." "It's a deal," Jake grinned, pulling her into a hug as the vast, uncertain, and gloriously free galaxy stretched out before them. Whatever happened next, they knew they would face it side by side. By choice. Always. And that was the only thing that mattered. The great harmony bell in the Athatheran capital chimed 13 times, its crystal-clear tones echoing across dimensions to announce something that had never happened before, a cross-species bonding ceremony broadcast live to every inhabited world. 6 months had passed since Admiral Vance's fall and the dawn of true galactic freedom. Now, Jake Morrison and Princess Lyra were about to make their accidental bond official. "Will you stop fidgeting?" Thyra grumbled, adjusting the shoulder on Jake's ceremonial armor for the 10th time. The suit was a stunning blend of cultures, the sharp lines of human military dress fused with shimmering, ethereal, alien crystalwork. It was something brand new. "I'm not fidgeting," Jake insisted, and then immediately tugged at his collar. "You've faced down assassins, corrupt admirals, and the total collapse of civilization," Thyra said, raising an eyebrow. "And a wedding is what makes you nervous?" "That stuff was easy," Jake mumbled. "You knew who the enemy was. You knew what you had to do. This—" He waved a hand at all the frantic preparations around them. "This matters in a whole different way." He could feel Lyra's own anxiety through their bond, mirroring his own from her chambers across the hall. Their connection had only deepened over the last few months, growing from a strange biological fluke into something beyond science. They could share thoughts, feelings, and even senses whenever they wanted. But the most important thing they learned was how to keep their own space, how to be two separate people who chose to be one instead of a single soul split in two. "The delegations are arriving," Kayix announced as he swept into the room. The wise old sage had become their most trusted advisor. "The Terran Federation sent their new council. The Void Collective's prince came himself. Even the crystalline entities have taken on physical forms for this." "Any trouble?" Jake asked. "Define trouble," Kayix replied dryly. "We have 3 different groups protesting the ceremony, calling it either blasphemy, a political power grab, or scientifically impossible. We've stopped 2 terrorist plots, and it appears someone has hacked the catering drones to serve nothing but Earth-style pizza." "That last one was me," Thyra confessed without looking up. "I wanted to try this pizza you're always talking about." Jake couldn't help but laugh. It was the perfect picture of their new life, terrifying threats mixed with total absurdity. The galaxy was learning to be free in all its messy, wonderful glory. A soft chime announced it was time. Jake walked toward the Great Assembly, a massive amphitheater built just for this day. It hung in the sky like a jewel, a floating city above the capital, its docks open to starships from every known world. The station itself was a marvel, a breathtaking fusion of design from a dozen different species. The crowd was a living galaxy, an uncountable swarm of beings from every corner of space, their forms and faces filling the Grand Assembly Hall, while billions more tuned in through quantum relays. Jake scanned the incredible audience and picked out faces he knew. There was Prince Keith Thrax, standing shoulder to shoulder with the bodyguard who was now his partner. He saw Federation officers who had bravely stood against Vance's madness and the architects of choice who had helped pull them all back from the brink of a galactic war. But for every familiar face, there were 1,000 strangers, people who had journeyed across unimaginable distances just to be here. At the heart of it all, on the ceremonial platform, stood the Emperor, not as a ruler today, but simply as a father. Any trace of the mind control that had once held him captive was gone. The pure, unfiltered love shining in his eyes when Lyra appeared was completely, undeniably his. She was a vision. It felt like her gown had been spun from the heart of a nebula, woven with living starlight that constantly shifted between solid and ethereal forms. But it was the look on her face that stole Jake's breath. It was a perfect blend of pure joy and fierce determination, a deep love sharpened by the understanding of what this marriage truly meant for everyone. "Citizens of the galaxy," the Emperor's voice boomed, reaching every soul in the assembly. "We are here today to witness a first. This is not just two people joining their lives. This is a bridge being built between entire worlds. This is the proof that our differences are not weaknesses to be feared, but strengths to be celebrated." Jake and Lyra met in the middle of the platform, their hands finding each other as easily as breathing. He felt her heart race through their bond, a perfect match to his own. "Before we begin," the Emperor said, "the bonded pair have asked to speak." It wasn't traditional, but nothing about them ever was. Lyra spoke first, her voice ringing with clarity and confidence. 6 months ago, Jake Morrison literally crashed into my life. He spoke words he did not understand, and I answered without thinking. In that one single accident, we started something that would change everything. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the endless crowd. But the accident was only the beginning. Every single day since then, we have chosen each other. We chose to understand our differences. We chose to stand against those who wanted to tear us apart. We chose love instead of fear. Now it was Jake's turn. He could feel the emotions of the crowd washing over him, a wild mix of hope, doubt, awe, and worry. "I was a soldier," he began. "Then I was a smuggler. Now, I'm this." He gestured to himself, a living symbol of two worlds combined. "I've made a lot of mistakes. I followed orders I shouldn't have, and I ran from things I should have faced. But speaking those accidental words to Lyra, that was the first truly honest thing I'd done in years. And choosing to stand by them, choosing her, and choosing all of this, it's made me more myself than I ever was before." "The ceremony will now," the Emperor started to say, but he was cut off by blaring alarms. High above the assembly, the very fabric of space seemed to rip open. An armada of ancient ships poured through the tear, ships that hadn't been seen in millennia, all bearing the crest of the original architects. "No," Kykes whispered, his voice trembling. "They're supposed to be extinct." A massive hologram projected from the lead ship. It was an architect, but not like the frail one they had met. This one was powerful, crackling with energy. "Children," the being's voice boomed, making reality itself vibrate, "playing with tools you cannot comprehend. You have destroyed our great work. You have unleashed chaos upon civilizations that were not ready for it. Did you truly believe we were all gone? Did you think we would let you ruin our legacy?" "You're the Overseer Council," Larole gasped as the horrifying realization hit her. "You're the ones who ordered the memory controls in the first place." "We are order," the architect declared, "and we have returned to restore it. This experiment in free will is over. It has failed. We see conflict spreading. We see species making choices that will destroy them. The controls will be turned back on. By force, if we must." "Like hell they will," Jake said, stepping forward, with Lyra right beside him. people are a mess," one of the godlike architects sneered, his voice echoing in Jake's mind. "Freedom is just another word for chaos. You talk about ownership, but these lesser beings can't even own their own mistakes." Another of them chimed in, "They're children who need a firm hand." That's when Leroy, a mind long gone but whose courage lived in Jake, spoke through him. "Then you have to let them grow up," he countered. "Let them stumble and fall and learn." The lead architect's voice was ice. "Mistakes that cost billions of lives? That's acceptable to your romantic fantasies, perhaps, but not to us." Jake felt a familiar, sickening pressure as the architects tried to flip the switch on the galaxy's mind control network again. But this time, it fizzled. It wasn't working. "What did you do?" the architect demanded, a crack in his perfect composure. A slow grin spread across Jake's face as it all clicked into place. "We gave them a choice. We told every single being in the galaxy about your little control system. We showed them exactly how you pull the strings. Right now, they can feel you trying to worm your way back into their heads, and they're telling you to get lost." It was happening. Across the assembly, across every star system, a silent rebellion was taking place as people consciously pushed back. Not everyone, of course. Some craved the comfort of having their decisions made for them. But enough did. More than enough. The lead architect's voice boomed with fury. "Then we will force order upon you. Submit, or you will be destroyed." But before anyone could panic, Lyra stepped forward. "Hold on a minute," she said, an idea sparking in her eyes. "You call yourselves preservers of life, but you're ready to commit genocide to prove your point?" The architect was unmoved. "To save a body, you sometimes have to cut away the diseased flesh." Jake shot back. "And who gave you the right to decide who's the disease? On what authority?" he pressed. "The authority of eons of existence," the architect retorted. "A wisdom you couldn't possibly comprehend." Lyra cut in, her voice ringing with clarity. "No, it's based on fear. You're terrified. You're scared of a little chaos, scared of what people will do with real choice. But most of all, you're scared of becoming irrelevant." She wasn't just talking to the architects anymore. She was speaking to the entire galaxy. These beings aren't gods. They're not even our guides. They're just another species. Sure, they're older and more powerful, but they're just as flawed as the rest of us. Jake stepped up beside her. "So prove us wrong," he challenged. "If your way is so much better, then compete for it. Make your sales pitch to the galaxy, and let people choose your guidance freely, without the hidden controls, without the threats." He let a smirk play on his lips. Unless you already know that if you gave people a real choice, they'd choose someone else." An impossible silence stretched across the void of space, and then something even more impossible happened. One of the architects laughed. It was a genuine, startling sound. "You're a clever little hybrid," she said, her shimmering form becoming more solid, almost friendly. "You've learned how to use our own logic as a weapon against us." "I had a good teacher," Jake replied, thinking of Caney. "Caney was a heretic," the lead architect spat. "But perhaps he had a point." He looked out at the sea of faces, at the fierce determination in a million different alien eyes. "Very well. We accept your challenge. We will compete in this marketplace of ideas you've created. But when your precious freedom brings nothing but disaster, we will be there to pick up the pieces and restore order." Lyra's voice was firm, a beacon of hope. "And we'll be there to offer another choice." With that, the architect's fleet pulled back. They were gone, but their presence lingered. Just one more opinion in a galaxy that was suddenly bursting with them. Some planets would surely choose the safety of the architects over the messy dangers of freedom. And that was their right. After a long, tense moment, the Emperor cleared his throat. "Well," he said, "that was incredibly dramatic. Now shall we get on with the wedding?" A wave of laughter, nervous, relieved, and utterly real, rippled through the crowd. The galaxy had stared down another apocalypse and had chosen its own destiny. A wedding almost seemed like an afterthought, but as Jake and Lyra stood before beings from 100 worlds, speaking vows they had written themselves, it felt like the most important thing in the universe. They weren't promises of unchanging devotion, but promises to choose each other every day, to grow together without losing themselves, and to face whatever came their way, as partners. It felt like the center of the cosmos. In human tradition, Jake said, holding up a simple ring of gold from Earth, set with a shimmering ethereal crystal that cycled through the entire rainbow. We exchange rings to show our bond. Lyra smiled and presented a circlet made of a living metal that would subtly shift and grow with its wearer. In ethereal tradition, she responded, we offer crowns. They don't represent ruling over each other, but sharing our own sovereignty. As they exchanged the gifts, they both felt a jolt through their unique connection. The ring and the circlet synced with their hybrid biology, becoming more than just symbols. They were high-tech marvels, designed to strengthen their bond while protecting their independence. By the authority vested in me by absolutely no one. Because we don't really do that anymore, the Emperor announced with a huge grin. I invite you to seal the deal and get this party started. They kissed, and for a heartbeat, their bond opened up for everyone to feel. Every being in that assembly felt a tiny echo of their connection, the joy, the fear, the hope, the love. It wasn't overwhelming or controlling, just a brief glimpse of what was possible when differences were celebrated instead of erased. The party that followed was one for the history books. Pizza, delivered by Thyra's hacked catering drones, was served right alongside delicacies from 1,000 different planets. New kinds of music were born from jam sessions between species who'd never met. The dance floors even adjusted their gravity fields so everyone, no matter their shape or size, could bust a move. At one point, Jake found himself chatting with Prince Kithrax, who had finally shown up with his own partner. You know, I should probably hate you, Kithrax said casually. You completely wrecked an alliance that took millennia to build. Sorry about that, Jake offered. Don't be, the prince replied with a smile. You freed me to choose this instead. He nodded toward his former bodyguard, now his husband, who was deep in a fascinating conversation with Thyra about alien biology. Believe it or not, the alliance between our people is stronger now. It's built on real cooperation, not a forced marriage. Jake shook his head in wonder. Funny how that works out. Indeed. But I have to ask, what's next for you two? Saving the galaxy is a tough act to follow. Jake's eyes found Lyra across the room, dancing with her father. They were both laughing, sharing some private joke. Through their bond, he could feel her pure contentment, her excitement for whatever came next, and her overwhelming love for him. We'll figure it out, he said, a feeling of peace settling over him. Together. As the party raged on, blending dimensions and species, Jake thought about his insane journey. It all started with a botched cargo run and ended with him at the center of a galactic revolution. It began with a careless joke and grew into a love that crossed the boundaries of biology itself, from a galaxy trapped in hidden chains to one buzzing with terrifying, beautiful, wonderful freedom. Hey, babe, Lyra said, appearing at his side, a little breathless from dancing. Yes, baby, he answered, their familiar call and response. Ready to see what happens next? She took his hand, and he felt their bond pulse with pure possibility. Outside, the galaxy spun on, chaotic, unpredictable, and alive with choice. The architects would make their case, and some would surely listen. Others would blaze their own trails. There might be wars, there might be peace, or there might be something no one had ever imagined. But whatever the future held, everyone would face it with their eyes wide open, choosing their own path. And at the very heart of it all, two people who had found each other by accident would keep choosing each other on purpose. They were living proof that the biggest changes in the universe often start with the simplest words. "Always ready," Jake answered, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. The future stretched out before them, a blank page, an unwritten story, and they wouldn't have it any other way, because in the end, they had learned that choice itself was the greatest adventure of all, and their journey was just beginning.